Coming up on the show, could PNG develop its very own Silicon Valley?
And straight away, there's mention of Silicon Valley, a naturally occurring cluster. Or think of Hollywood.
And strengthening bilateral relations and business ties between PNG and New Zealand was on Minister Murray McCully's agenda during his visit to the country last week. Good evening, I'm Leanne Jarari. Welcome to another episode of Business PNG, your weekly look at business news and updates. On the 8th of every month, fuel prices are readjusted all around the country. Sometimes it is adjusted downwards, but most of the time it's adjusted upwards, which has been the trend so far this year. While fuel prices have gone down at times, the ICCC has reported that this decrease has not been significant enough, and while some people may not be aware of the increase in fuel prices, its repercussions surely can be felt. Over the past few weeks, fuel prices in the country have increased significantly.
Yes, every month. Every month of the date 8th of every month, price normally increases. It never steadies all the way right through the year.
The surge saw petrol prices increase by 11 toya, going from 4 kina to 4 kina 11 toya. The Independent Consumer and Competition Commission have stated that the sharp rise is in large part due to high international shipping freight rate, continuing depreciation of the value of the kina, and high domestic sea freight rates.
The price of crude oil that's used for refining into fuel products, and price of international price of shipping, and those type of things go into the final price in PNG, and we also have the exchange rate for kina against the US dollar.
On a world scale, fuel prices differ considerably across countries. The prices of fuel in some of the petrol-producing states are less than a few dollars for the liter. World market prices for crude oil a year ago, in April of 2013, was $103 per barrel, while this month's prices are at $105. According to the ICCC, though there have been slight decreases over the past few months, on average, fuel prices tend to increase steadily to the point that the decrease in prices have little to no significance. This month, the average price of gasoline around the world is $1.46. However, all countries have access to the same petroleum prices of international markets, but are then charged differently upon international and domestic shipping as well as taxes.
Oil and fuel, they are world commodities. So whatever happens to the prices out in the world, it gets reflected in country. So for the prices that have happened, the changes that have happened recently, that's based on what's happening out in the world.
These prices are world market prices and therefore are subject to fluctuations according to global petrol prices. An oil-producing state, Papua New Guinea's first and only refinery is Interoil's Napa Napa refinery, built under a 30-year project agreement with the PNG government. The refinery produces fuel gas, LPG, diesel and other products for the PNG market based on import parity prices regulated by the ICCC.
It's true that they'll be incurring high cost fuel price because fuel is one of the very important factor into a business. In order to transport goods and services from one place to another, you definitely need fuel to do that. But to the business, it's a passing through cost. So at the end of the day, the cost has been passed through high prices for the goods and services supplied by the business, and the victim that really feel the pains of these are the ordinary consumers down the line that we pay for higher prices. Yeah.
Naturally, many consumers have felt the pinch of this increasing fuel prices. And how much a week do you spend on fuel?
Probably 200, 300.
Not only do high fuel costs affect vehicle owners, but also consumers of other goods and services, as businesses add these fuel charges to their markups.
Apart from that, there's other stuff like that, rising cost of food and everything, and then as on top of that, then we have to deal with the fuel costs again. So it's really going to hit everyone really hard. Yeah.
Welcome back. You're watching Business PNG. While developing PNG's very own Silicon Valley could simply be a dream come true for some, we may be actually not that far off. And how could this certainly be possible? Through the development of clusters, which brings me to my next question: what exactly is a cluster? And to give us the answer is this man E4 Williams, who is Clusters Advisor to the Pacific Islands Private Sector Organization. I had a chance to chat with him during his visit to the country for the Regional Clusters Initiative program, sponsored by the European Union and carried out by PIPSO. Can you briefly explain what a cluster development is? What is the significance of the developments?
Firstly, when we talk about a cluster, we're not talking about anything that's new. We're talking about a natural occurrence. This morning we've been with the ICT group, and straight away there's mention of Silicon Valley, a naturally occurring cluster. Or think of Hollywood. Or perhaps here in Papua New Guinea, we've got areas because of the climate, the soil, where coffee grows, or maybe vanilla grows, or different agricultural crops. So a cluster is a natural occurrence. And what we're doing in cluster development is understanding how do we move that forward? How do we grow from that base? Understanding in part what is holding back those businesses, and how might that be addressed to support business growth, to support employment growth, to support economic growth.
From your experience, can you tell us about cluster development in the world?
As I look around the world, 75, maybe close to 100 countries today have got some form of cluster development program in place. Every single EU country is engaged in firstly identifying what are the regional specializations, understanding them, and then understanding how do we help those grow. So across the world, across the US and Canada and South Africa, I've been working in countries like Uganda and places like Peru that are all engaged in a practical way in building their clusters, the equivalent of ICT here in Papua New Guinea.
So cluster development is pretty new in the Pacific. How has it been done so far?
Cluster development is very new, and I think this is the first initiative, and an initiative that is funded through the EU, so reflecting in part this works in Europe. Now let's understand how do we help it work in the Pacific countries? What do we need to change? What do we need to adjust for this environment? So this is the first program to introduce cluster development, and we're developing 4 pilots here, one in Papua New Guinea, one in Tonga, one in Samoa, and one in Vanuatu, and different sectors in each country.
How does one initiate a cluster, and how do you go about, what are the steps involved?
We initiate a cluster process and firstly identify who do we have, who are the different stakeholders in this cluster. And the stakeholders, you can think of them, the businesses at the core of the cluster. And often they're businesses that are servicing more distant customers, so they're pulling wealth into the region. You can think of the support firms, maybe packaging suppliers, banks, transport firms. And also the soft infrastructure, the training institutions, the government agencies, perhaps the donors, that could all be considered part of that cluster. So step 1 is to understand who do we have in this cluster? And step 2 is then to understand what are some of the impediments? What are some of the things that are holding us back? What are some things that are holding the companies back?
Now, obviously, location is a prime concern in this concept. Do you know where the PNG cluster could be developed?
Well, a cluster is a natural occurrence. It's quite natural. Quite naturally, I would imagine Port Moresby is a logistics cluster, where containers are coming in, the airport. This is a logistics, it's a transportation hub for PNG. And I would expect in other parts of PNG, and if we look across a country like the US, there are many different specializations in different places.
Why was the ICT sector in PNG chosen over manufacturing or agriculture? Because obviously in PNG, agriculture is a bigger sector than ICT. It's one of our main sectors.
ICT was selected in part because this is one of tomorrow's industries for Papua New Guinea. In part because it's an activity where there's a lot of young people already engaging. In part because we've got in Papua New Guinea quite a number of people that have studied overseas at universities, particularly in Australia. They're coming back with ICT capabilities, ICT skills. Where ICT also stands out is that it creates quality jobs. It creates well-paying jobs. Selected in part because it underpins a wide range of activities right across the economy. Selected also in part because I think so far nobody has really acknowledged ICT. There's been a lot of support for different agricultural activities, for other sectors of the economy. So let's see what we can do here in winding up ICT. And the potential looks great.
Could the ICT cluster be beneficial in any way to the uneducated masses that we have in the country?
One of the areas where ICT can have an impact here in Papua New Guinea is in education. Particularly the development of education, e-education, e-books, perhaps for rural communities. Another area where ICT perhaps has got a major application here in Papua New Guinea is in providing health or improving health services. So e-health is what it is sometimes called. So see ICT as being a mechanism to support rural development, but perhaps also as we develop the skills to support, let's say, remote schools or remote health clinics across Papua New Guinea, maybe we also develop the skills that can be used to support remote health or to deliver remote health services in Africa or in South America. And so over time we develop from Papua New Guinea international competencies, international specializations. And that's one of the things that I see in many clusters around the world. As the cluster becomes more specialized, the market it is servicing moves out, and moves out from perhaps just Papua New Guinea to the Pacific Islands, to the Southern Hemisphere, to the world. But a key to that is the specialization, but it takes time for that to come through.
Well, ICT sector, as I mentioned, is a young sector here in PNG. We have quite a few challenges, such as high internet costs. How can the cluster development project help deal with these challenges?
You have some disadvantages here in terms of bandwidth and the cost of bandwidth that hopefully will be resolved. But getting that physical infrastructure in place is the first step. What you also need to get in place is the knowledge infrastructure. And you've got quite a bit of that already, as we were talking with the graduates that are returning here from Australian and other universities. So the knowledge infrastructure is coming through. So we need the physical infrastructure, we need the knowledge infrastructure, and the third thing is the social infrastructure. And by that I mean the connections. So the social infrastructure is a key ingredient, along with the knowledge, along with the physical.
Now, what you're trying to develop is a Silicon Valley of Papua New Guinea, or here in Papua New Guinea. Now, you mentioned infrastructure. We currently have the national broadband network that is being developed. How can this, how can the NBN help with the ICT cluster?
You need bandwidth, and it's great to see that coming through. But you also need the knowledge infrastructure, you also need the social infrastructure. And in a way, building the physical bandwidth is the easy bit. Much more difficult is building the knowledge infrastructure. Even more difficult still is building the social connections. One of the words sometimes used around the world is co-opetition. And by co-opetition, I mean companies working through where might they collaborate. Yes, they compete, and it's healthy for businesses to compete. But it is also healthy for businesses to work through, hey, we've got some common agendas. Or maybe with my capability and your capability, we've got the competency to put in for that larger tender that separately we can't engage on. So a culture of co-opetition, but that's based on trust.
If you wish to find out more information with regards to this ICT Clusters Initiative project, please contact the PNG Business Council. After the break, we talk to New Zealand's Foreign Affairs Minister, Mari McCarley. Stay with us. A trade delegation from New Zealand visited the country last week with aims of strengthening bilateral and business relations between the two countries. New Zealand has been an active development partner in the region. An ongoing program in the country was the NZ-Aid-funded community policing project in Bougainville. Over the past 10 years, New Zealand has supported Bougainville in its reconstruction, including the strengthening of law and justice systems and governance. Accompanying the delegation from Aotearoa was the New Zealand Minister for Foreign Affairs, Mr. Murray McCully. Business PNG had a chance to chat to the minister. Here's David Conn with the interview.
Murray, welcome to Port Moresby. Welcome back to Papua New Guinea.
Great to be here again.
Fourth visit, I think you've...
Something like that, yeah. It's second one in 8 months, which sees something about the tempo of the relationship.
Well, I wanted to ask that. So tell me, so we're on the radar, obviously, in New Zealand?
Yeah, this is in one of those relationships that I think does require good senior contact every year.
Yes,
we had
yeah.
Prime Minister O'Neill in New Zealand last year. As I say, I was here 8 months ago. This is in the top echelon of foreign policy relationships, and I think the level of interest from our private sector guys also is substantial.
You've brought quite a few private sector guys, and we see them coming through a lot. Is there a lot of interaction and business between New Zealand and Papua New Guinea?
Yeah, my one disappointment on this trip was that I couldn't bring the Air Force plane. We've got
I see.
Prince William in New Zealand at the
Oh,
moment.
yeah,
So
yeah.
next time I want to come with the Air Force plane, chocker with New Zealand business people.
All right, okay.
There's one big impediment, of course, is the lack of a direct flight to Moresby from Auckland. I hope we'll overcome that soon, but in the meantime, I'd like to see a group of 70, 80 business people. We've got some heavy hitters here this time, but we want more of them.
So there used to be a direct flight Port Moresby, Auckland. Is the discussions in the background going on in that?
I raise it with Air New Zealand every time I meet the senior management. I think it's on their radar screen, and I think as we're seeing forecast 20% GDP growth here next year, New Zealand firms playing their part in that, you're going to see traffic build to the point where I think it's going to happen.
Your own New Zealand economy is not doing too badly, yeah. I mean, I know we all look a little bit askance at 15-20%, but that's premised on gas. I mean, but the New Zealand economy is very strong at the moment too.
Well, the official forecast is 3.6% growth this year.
Is that all?
Some of the comments. Well, it would be the 6th highest in the OECD, which is pretty good. But I was feeling good about that, and some commentators saying 4% growth. Then you come here and you talk different numbers.
We're talking 6 this year, and then 15 perhaps next year. Yeah. What will there be any play in the LNG scenario for New Zealand businesses, do you think?
Oh, I think there'll be some, and obviously this trip's been a learning experience again as we look at this sort of hiatus as you about to start the flow of LNG, about to start the next big investment program. I want to make sure that New Zealand businesses are better represented here. We've announced the appointment of a full-time trade commissioner here.
Tell us a little bit about that.
All departments have been asked to take a decent haircut while we deal with the costs of Christchurch rebuild, but
of course,
we've had room in the NZTE budget to actually by chopping out a couple of posts to create a post here. So I'm excited about that.
So that again just describes the vibrancy of the relationship there. Yeah. So will that be? So you'll be an NZTE appointment here, or will it be based with based at the HICOM? Yeah.
I'm not sure what the location is going to be, but we try and have them co-located where that's possible. But that'll actually help a lot. I've talked to our outgoing High Commissioner, and I know that there's a lot of work that they've not felt resourced to do that our Trade Commissioner is going to be able to do to support New Zealand business.
I mentioned this morning, our own Minister Maru talking about the need to develop the base of our economy through SMEs, and of course we all totally agree with that. I mean, New Zealand is based on SMEs. I think it's 400,000 of them or something. What can New Zealand bring to the table for us there? How can they assist us?
Well, PNG's got a solid head start. You go to conferences about development anywhere and you'll hear lots of talk about the private sector, leaving room for the private sector. But in most cases, that's lip service. You do have a good private sector here.
We're pretty pushy.
Yeah, well, my own view is that there's relatively little that's required. I think the Business Mentors program is a good one. I think transfers, secondments, those sorts of things, scholarships, backwards and forwards, key ways of nurturing talent and creating good business cultures and good governance arrangements. The other thing I'd like to see, of course, is the direct flights, because I think making it possible to commute backwards and forwards
Yes,
within
yeah.
a day or two easily, that would actually also be a significant contributor to, to growing that SME sector.
Would that also be a link for us into other Pacific countries through New Zealand to here? I mean, is that how you're seeing it? Or?
Yeah, it is. The logistics of travel around the region are pretty awful, actually. You've got to zigzag backwards and forwards through Auckland to get to most Pacific capitals. So I've got a program of discussions underway at the moment within Polynesia, within the Polynesian subgroup. Hoping that when the Polynesian leaders meet before the forum later on this year, we'll have a concrete proposal which is going to be about better connections inside Polynesia and being able to market in places like Europe and North America. A fare that gets you through Polynesia and allows you to hop around a bit. Now the airlines, I've been talking directly to airlines about this, they think it's something that we can make work.
Okay. Looking at the other end of the spectrum in Indonesia, I mean, there's been some talk, and a large delegation from PNG went there last year, some talk that the Indonesians are looking for a link through PNG, possibly to Australia, to New Zealand. I mean, there's surely some interaction there between PNG and New Zealand.
Yeah, of course, Papua New Guinea's got a very pivotal role to play in the development of Indonesia as a country, and there's some of the interest groups still look at West Papua as a flashpoint, and I greatly admire the leadership that your government has brought to dealing with that challenge. It's a very mature, very sophisticated approach to managing that relationship. I hope that can be built into something more commercial in the way of an air connection as well, but we're also hoping to have direct air links to Jakarta. I've been talking to Garuda about that, and to Air New Zealand. The first step has been an announcement by Air New Zealand that they'll go direct to Singapore again and code share with Singapore Airlines. I think that as you build up the onwards, the connections through from there to Jakarta, to Ho Chi Minh City, to Manila, you'll have the traffic to justify direct flights to those other places over time. So I think that Moresby's got a part to play in that evolution.
As you travel through the region, do you see Papua New Guinea starting to assert itself more in the region? Is it becoming a bigger player? Obviously economically, but I mean, otherwise, is it?
It's very noticeable. In part that comes from size, but part of it also comes from the way you hold yourself in international gatherings. And Papua New Guinea has done a really good job of holding itself appropriately in the region, dealing with difficult issues like Fiji. Rimbing Pato has been a terrific partner and friend to have as part of that regional conversation. But PNG's been putting its hand up in an ASEAN context and saying, hey, we want to join.
And have been for a while,
And that's, of course, made the Southeast Asian nations think, okay, the geographical argument is very strong. What are the impediments here? How do we work our way through this? That's a conversation that New Zealand businesses need to note, because increasingly this place is going to get integrated into the ASEAN economy as well, and we need to be part of that story.
Come back to the trade issues, the trade advantages, I think, in New Zealand. I mean, so where are the main areas? You mentioned geothermal this morning. I mean, we think of clean energy, we think of your rich heritage in dairy, and you know, our minister's openly espoused that he wants a dairy industry in Papua New Guinea. Is that something your businesses are showing appetite for? Or?
The energy one is relatively easy. There's one impediment. We don't have a electricity generator that is a big offshore player at this stage. And we've just seen 3 of them that were 100% owned by the state, sold down to 51%. And I guess directors of those energy companies are going to have to say, well, we know what the return is going to be from our domestic assets. Do we need to have a balanced portfolio and do something more adventurous, maybe a bit more risk, but bigger return? That's a question I hope they'll ask themselves. But there are big engineering and other sort of associated firms in the energy sector who are already significant players up here. I think the energy one is going to be a real opportunity, particularly geothermal, where actually New Zealand's got really world-class engineering skills. Agriculture, look, we're a world-leading agricultural producer. We're actually very unusual, being a developed country
Yes, yeah.
with an agriculturally
Very strong
based
base,
economy. I think we can contribute a lot. The development budget is just the way of opening the door and transferring some skills.
Yes,
The commercial sector can actually do most of this.
Tell us a little bit about the announcement you made yesterday at Gordon's Market. I think that's an exciting initiative as well.
Yeah, so last time I was here, I went up to the Highlands. Rimbik Pato took me up to
Yes,
Ringa
he
Province,
would.
and
I'm sure he would, yes, yeah.
and we went to Mount Hagen and looked at the absolutely world-class growing environment.
Yes,
So we've obviously talked about why goods are being imported, particularly from Australia, fresh produce into Moresby, and whether we could do something to try and make that more locally based.
Yes,
And so we've not just announced the $7 million Kiwi, which I think is about 15 million kina, to partner the local authority here in redeveloping the Gordon's Market, both for retail and for wholesale.
Okay.
We've committed some funding to cool stores in key places so that growers can have the confidence to bring their stuff to the store.
And sell in bulk.
And we're looking at what we can do to improve the logistical connections. We've got a conversation going on that front.
Okay.
And we're working with some of the big producers to talk about how they can scale up and work together to overcome these logistical
And
challenges.
the retail end of it, have you got the major retailers here involved?
I'm hoping to meet them before I go today, and I
Okay.
understand there's 3 or 4 big players that have said yes, they're very interested, and I'm very keen, particularly for the locally owned ones, to play a key part here.
And that's all we have for you tonight. For any comments or suggestions, or for any information that you would like to share with us, email us now on the address shown on your screen. For more business news, or if you would simply like to view this episode again, visit the MTV website. That's mtv.com.pg/business. Don't forget to connect with us using our Facebook or Twitter page. Until next week, have a pleasant evening. I'm Leanne Jarari, and this is Business PNG.